Raven Art Renditions, and we're talking with Hendrik Varju again. Hey, Hendrik, how is it up north?
It's getting cold, Andrew.
Tis the season pretty soon. Actually, tis the season. I've been hearing Christmas music way too early this year.
Oh, yeah. I try to stay out of the malls till about 3 days before Christmas, so I don't really see that stuff too much.
Ours is our Thanksgiving is coming up here in a little over a week, and the day after Thanksgiving, I avoid everything like the plague. I try to stay out of stores, off the roads. They call it Black Friday down here, and it is insane.
And why is your Thanksgiving always on a Thursday?
It's usually, if I remember correctly, and don't quote me on this, and somebody's probably going to yell at me, but I think it's the last Thursday of the month in November every year.
Okay, so it's always Black Friday.
Yeah, it's always Black Friday.
Yeah, I hear that a lot of the bigger stores are even opening Thanksgiving afternoon or evening, eh?
Yeah, that is not right. It's one of them where I don't mind going to the store normally. There's certain stores I avoid just because I don't like the store, but on that day, last year my wife and I went out for a little while. But we went late in the day when all the big crazy sales are done, and just because there were certain things that they still had on sale and you knew they weren't going to sell out of. But other than that,
Yeah, I mean, our Thanksgiving here must have been about 4 or 5 weeks ago at least, so it's kind of hard to imagine you having Thanksgiving and Christmas so close together.
Yeah, it is. It is close. They, it's Thanksgiving, and then it's Christmas, and then it's New Year's. So it's always, everybody refers to it as the holidays, because they're all right in a row. Yeah. And in Wisconsin, deer hunting is really big. So the opening weekend of deer hunting is always the weekend before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So pretty much the whole week is almost like a state holiday here.
Okay. You're eating deer instead of turkey, eh?
Yeah, well, I haven't been able to go hunting in a while, but we used to. You go out and then you go out Thanksgiving morning and everything else. So this year actually we're doing what they call the turkey trot. It's my daughter's into running, and she's actually very good at it, and she's going to run, and my wife and I are walking. So it's for a charity thing, so it's kind of fun.
Good.
Yeah. Well, last time that we talked, we covered the Mortise and Tenon Joinery DVD that you had just put out. And we had quite a few commenters, and instead of doing like we normally do and just sending somebody an email and telling them they won, we figured we'd pick it on the recording here and then let them know that they won, hopefully that they're listening. I will post it as well, but how about we pick a winner here?
Sure.
All right, hang on.
Some kind of random number generator.
Actually, I cheat. I have a thing where I say, here, which post and how many winners, and then I click go.
Okay.
And I'm clicking go, so let's see who it comes up with here.
It's like some kind of big Powerball draw here.
Yeah, that's about it. So Gene H made a comment, and let's see. Gene said, always enjoy your interviews. Thanks for this site and all the podcasts. So Gene, I'll be sending you an email, and it'll have the code on there. And then he just goes to, I guess it's go to the DVD, and then pick. There's a PayPal looking button, and it says you can order it here. And then in the comments, Gene, you'll be able to enter the code that I send you, and Hendrik knows which code that is. And is there anything else you want him to fill out while he's there?
No, that's it. No, he just, go to the Mortise and Tenon Joinery DVD page on passionforwood.com/woodworking. And then, when he clicks on the PayPal link, it's like an order form, so he can just fill out his name, address, the code that you gave him, and then I will just ship it to him for free, no charge for shipping either.
Okay, cool. That sounds great. Well, and thanks for commenting.
Where's he from? You don't know?
It doesn't. He didn't say where he's from. He didn't mention that one in there, but
we're assuming he's American, I guess.
Yeah, well, probably. So, Gene, congratulations on winning that, and I'll get you that code very soon. When this gets posted, I'll make sure that I post Gene's name and everything that he won the last one too. So.
Okay, good. Sounds good.
Yeah, and this time we're actually talking about your other new DVD, and it's the Honing and Setting Joiner and Planer Knives.
Yeah, sounds like an exciting topic.
If you're not a woodworker, I don't think somebody else would be watching this one.
I do a seminar by the same name in my shop once a year, and I actually call it the world's most boring seminar in my seminar notice. It's pretty darn dry, you know. I have 8 or 10 people huddled around the joiner for 2 hours watching how I adjust the knife height. But you know, as dry as it is, it sure is necessary, you know.
Well, and I have some wood actually sitting on the router table right now, ready to cut some grooves in it, and I've been making some fitted lid boxes lately, and I'm trying to make some for people for Christmas, and then I'm gonna paint the outside of several of them with milk paint, 2 layers, and sand through to make them look old, stuff like that. And if you don't start with that, you know, really true face and a true edge, you're trying to get a fitted lid, you know, on there without straight stuff. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to do. I mean, sometimes you want to make make the lid slightly too big and sort of trim it down after the fact, if you can, like with a flush trim bit. But like your lid is just fitting right in. There's no hinges, right?
Yeah, there's no hinges. And actually, what I'm doing is I'm doing a groove on one side with the router table, and then I move it out and then flip it over, and there's a groove on the other side. And there's an 1/8 inch difference in between where I put those grooves.
Okay.
I cut the lid off once it's all constructed on the table saw, and I just slip 1/8 inch pieces in when it gets so far, and then one slides right onto the other.
I see. So you're cutting the lid off the box after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know some people do that even without cutting all the way through with the table saw, like almost all the way, but not quite, and then finishing off with a hand saw. I don't know if you've heard of that, so that you don't have to put the shims in.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. I haven't done it that way, but so far the couple little prototypes I made, they all worked fine, and they'll get painted up because they're not as pretty.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice because if you have hinges, it's amazing how just the tiniest little bit that you could be off center on a screw, like going into the hinge countersink, and it'll pull the lid right sideways. So it doesn't matter how well the lid fits. If even one screw is slightly off, the whole lid doesn't fit right anymore. So
yeah,
it's pretty fussy, you know.
Especially with the fitted, when one's kind of going inside the other, it's like,
oh yeah, you gotta just give someone the box with no lid on it.
Here you go.
A little bit of plastic wrap to put over the top or something.
Yeah, just set this on top. You're fine.
Yeah, it's like a do-it-yourself kit.
There you go. There you give them a project for Christmas.
Just give them some rough lumber and a few hand tools. They go at it.
There you go. Start woodworking.
Yeah. So, anyways, like in terms of joiner planer, one of the things I notice a lot is I have a student sign up for a lesson on how to use a jointer, and they come in and maybe spend a day with me learning how to joint faces and edges and how to read the grain and all that. But then they can still go home and struggle like heck because their joiner isn't set up right? So if they happen to live, in the Toronto area, they can hire me to come out and tune up their joiner or set their knives or teach them how. But, that's the purpose of this whole DVD, is that it's not enough to know how to use a joiner and planer. You have to know how to maintain them and how to set the knives and the outfeed bed height correctly. So it's pretty fussy stuff.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I've met people that tried to change their knives once, and then the joiner basically never worked right again after that. And then, they spent the next 2-3 years trying to work without a jointer because they couldn't figure it out. And sometimes it's such a simple thing, like they got the knife height right. They got the 3 knives at the same height to each other, which, is necessary, but they didn't get the outfeed bed height correct relative to the knives. And if it's not right, the joiner won't work at all.
No.
So it really is not that complex when you explain it, but most people just don't know this stuff, and it's not always even set up right from the factory. So you can't assume buying a new one is just suddenly going to work perfectly either.
No. There's times, depending on what joinery you get and where you get it from, there's times it's worse from the factory and than if you have it otherwise.
Yeah. And, the quality of the manufacturing these days doesn't seem to be getting better.
No.
Than it used to be. It tends to be going downhill. So, anyway, so, yeah, you have a copy of the DVD, but, the way it starts, quite a bit of the production is about the jointer, and then there's also some on I have a 20-inch Steel City planer, so
wow.
I show how to change the knives on a floor model planer. Some people might have something like the DeWalt DW621. What am I saying? That's a router I'm thinking of. do you remember? You don't have a DeWalt portable planer, do you?
No, actually,
the 735 is what I'm thinking. The DW735.
Yep.
That's like the newest DeWalt planer, and it's anyone who has a planer like that. It has a quick knife setting system, so that part of my DVD wouldn't apply because literally you just pop the knives out and pop in new ones. But the part of my DVD covering planer knife changing applies to portable planers or floor models that have a standard straight knife system.
Okay.
That isn't quick setting. It's the kind where you have to put the knife behind the knife locking bar, and you usually have jack screws to crank the knife up and down. So, anyways, but there's quite a bit of coverage on planer knives as well, but there's a even heavier focus on the jointer because to me that's the much harder one to set up, and it's also the only machine in your shop that can flatten stock, so it's a very important machine.
Yeah, and it's important that it's accurate.
Yeah. So, and I start in the video in chapter 1. The chapter is called Sharpening Services and Getting It Sharper. What that's about is I show some knives that I got back from a sharpening service, and I show how poorly sharpened they were, and then show you how to improve it even more before you put them in the machine. Which makes you kind of wonder, well, why do you even send them out in the first place? Why not just do it yourself? Well, mainly because when you chip your joiner knives, you can have some pretty large bits of metal missing, and that takes a lot of grinding to get past.
Yep.
So I still send my knives out for grinding, but the level to which they sharpen is nowhere near what I consider sharp. So when I get it back, I'm just happy if they got rid of the knife chips.
The big nicks.
And then I take them to my Norton Waterstones or different kinds of Waterstones I have, and I bring them up to a really sharp level. Like hand planes and chisels, I go up to 8,000 grit. Machinery knives, I only go 1,000 grit. I find that's more than enough, and way more than any sharpening service usually does. But the worst thing is to put in knives that you just had sharpened by a sharpening service, and on the very first cut, you already have some track marks on it because they didn't quite get a couple of chips out of it, right?
Yeah. Send them out to have more problems.
Yeah, my planer knives, because they're 20-inch, and that planer I have has 4 knives, it costs me about $80 to sharpen once, the 4 knives, so it's not cheap. And if you get them back and they're not quite perfect, you're kind of annoyed paying that money, and it's still not quite right.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it's kind of hard to expect a sharpening service sharpening thousands of these all the time, that it's kind of hard to expect them to bring it up to the level a fine woodworker might be used to, like, because you get a bit obsessive about these things working with hand planes and stuff, right?
Yeah. and there's umpteen videos about you need to sharpen more, and which way to sharpen.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Sharpening's one of those things that you always kind of put off and delay because you just don't want to have unproductive time. But in the long run, it is productive time because it's going to give you a better job.
Yeah. So now, say if you bought, you talk about the sharpening services if you send them out. Now, if you buy say you bought a new set of blades for a joiner, would you
Yeah.
would you still run through the same process?
It depends on how they were made. For example, if you buy knives for a jointer that have a micro bevel already on them,
Mm-hmm.
I find that they're incredibly sharp out of the package. But I find other brands, they'll sell steel blades, like high-speed steel with a certain percentage of tungsten in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it will have just a primary bevel with no secondary bevel. And I will just be able to tell immediately when I look at them that they're not quite as sharp as I would like. I'm not saying they're chipped or anything, but they're just not at a high level. You can kind of see the grind marks from the factory on them.
Yeah, they need the final.
I find most brands of jointer knives do need something more, even when they are brand new. But I have seen a few brands where they were incredibly sharp. Like for example, the DeWalt knives. I mentioned the DeWalt 735. Again, that's a quick knife setting system, so the knives are not meant to be sharpened, right? They're disposable. Well, those kinds of disposable knives, they're so sharp when you buy them, like they're dangerous, right? You can't do any better than that.
Yeah.
So the one thing going for brand new knives, even if they don't have a micro bevel, is that they're as straight across the cutting edge as you're ever going to see. Once you send them out for sharpening again in feature, they'll never come back as straight as they were brand new from the factory.
Oh, I suppose.
Which is a big problem because, let's say you have a 15-inch floor model planer, and the sharpening service somehow put a bit of a curve into the tip. Now your planer's cutting deeper in the middle, not as deep on the outside. And, all three knives are ground slightly different from each other as well. So sometimes the quality of cut isn't great for the first couple of weeks until you kind of wear the knives more even to each other again. Plus you put a wide plank, like a wide panel or something you've made through the whole planer. And when you measure it with a dial caliper, you find out that let's say the middle is 8 or 9 thou thicker than the edges, the outside edges. That doesn't sound that bad, but then if you flip the panel end over end and plane the opposite side, you've now doubled the error.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're suddenly 16 thou thick in the middle, and then you're trying to push that panel into a groove that you cut on the router table for a frame and panel door. 16 thou is huge. I mean, that's...
Or a fitted lid box, and it doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm pretty obsessive about this stuff. So when I'm milling a solid piece of wood in my planer to fit into a dado or a groove, I send the part through one part of my planer and cut, and then measure with a dial caliper what the thickness is, and then I'll just move the board 4 or 5 inches further left or right, and send the same board through again, and if it cuts more off, then I measure how much it is now, and I'll even write on the top of my planer, this spot here is 6 thou deeper than this spot over here.
Yep.
It's not something I do daily, but anytime I'm making something where the thickness is crucial, I'll send a piece of scrap through the planer in several places. I'll spend 15-20 minutes testing the knives to get the different height areas. And I'll write right on top, let's, for example, the middle of the planer, let's call that 0, and then the far right is cutting 8 thou deeper than the middle, and the far left is cutting 12 thou deeper than the middle. Because maybe I just need to mill a piece 4 inches wide to fit into a dado. If I know that a certain 4-inch section of my knife is flat to within 1 thou or better, then that's where I'm going to push it through, right? So, anyways, it's annoying stuff, but if you have that kind of mind, like kind of engineering type of mind, then you kind of do care about these things so that you save yourself having to hand fit everything.
Yeah, and a lot of us are a little obsessive when it comes to our woodworking stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing that a lot of people maybe haven't even thought of, but once I explain it to them, then they're like, oh yeah, now I see that it matters, and putting in 15 minutes testing the planer before you do something important can save you from doing a half hour of using a shoulder plane or sanding or whatever people do
or
to try and fit these
piece.
things. Yeah. So, anyways, it would be nice if you just send it out to a sharpening service, get it back, and pop it in, and off you go. But life's never that simple.
on so many things.
Oh yeah. I had a seminar here last Saturday, and I was having to accurately mark some things, and I said I'm going to go to the drill press and start drilling these dowel holes, and maybe a couple of you could do some more marking, like while I'm doing that, and then bring the pieces over to me so I can drill them. Anyways, then when they brought them to me, the marking was pretty poor. I could look at it and immediately say, okay, this is like about 8 thou too far left, and this one's 5 thou too far right. So I just eyeballed as I was drilling. I adjusted for the errors I saw. And I said, one of the toughest skills in woodworking is actually marking out and measuring. Mm-hmm. And then one of the guys said, yeah, and joinery and finishing, and he started listing about everything you ever do in woodworking. But you have to have a mind for accuracy. Like you have to have that kind of mentality where every time something goes wrong, you do want to know why. Mm-hmm. You don't just shrug your shoulders and go, oh well, I guess it didn't work out. I mean, you have to find out, wait a minute, how did this happen? How did this board come out of my plane 12 thou thicker on this side than that side? And there is an explanation if you search for it, right?
You just got to dig a little bit.
Yeah. So, people are surprised when I tell them that for me to change my joiner knives takes me about 2 hours. Mm-hmm. That's the whole process. That's taking out the old ones, cleaning up the cutter head, doing a little maintenance while I'm in there. Mm-hmm. Taking the knives that I just had sharpened and honing them further to get them really sharp, installing them precisely at the same height, and then setting up the outfeed bed at the perfect height, and then testing the jointer. You got all these different knife locking bolts to do, and if you're trying to be accurate, it does take time. So it's not the kind of thing you do in 20 minutes.
No, it takes you might be able to do it in 20 minutes, but it's not going to work quite right.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, I see people on the internet posting comments. They'll probably post one on your site after this conversation.
That's
and
right.
they say things like, I don't know what the big deal is. I just changed mine last night. It took me 10 minutes, and it was perfect within 0 thou. And I just don't believe it. I honestly think either the person's lying or they're just not doing accurate work. I don't know. I just can't see that happening. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for a lot of years, and it's still a very precise and slow task, right? Mm. If I really had to rush, I'm sure I could do it in 1 hour if I had to. But it's not something you do every day, and when you do it, it's kind of a chance to do some general maintenance on the machine at the same time. So.
Well, general maintenance, and it's something, like you said, you don't do every day. So when you have to think about it, make sure you get it all right. And then when you're doing it, it might as well, when you rush, when I've always found is when you rush is when you forget something, miss something, or goof something up. So you might as well take your time, get it right, because then you don't have to do it for how long. And just about every piece of wood that you're going to use touches that thing.
Oh, yeah.
So it might as well be done right.
Yeah. I know a few years ago I was at somebody's workshop. He's actually not even a 10-minute drive from my place. And he said, actually his wife kind of forced him to hire me to come over to his shop because he had just gotten hit by a kickback.
Oh, wow.
And she said, he doesn't want to hire you, but I want to hire you because I think the next time he might take his head right off or something. So anyways, I went over there and looked over his table saw and figured out how it was set up wrong and, tried to educate him on kickback and why it happens and everything. Mm. Anyways, at the end of the day, I was just about to leave, packed up my tools, ready to leave out the door, and he goes, oh, just one more quick thing. Can you just change my joiner knives real quick?
Quick thing.
And I was like, well, that's not like changing a table saw blade. It normally takes me 2 hours. He's like, oh, really? Well, how quick do you think you could do it? I think I did it in about 45 minutes, like a real rush job. And it was still done well. Like I tested it at the end, and it worked fine. But normally you're not working at that kind of speed because it was covered in pitch from pine and everything else. And normally I would really go at it and give it a good cleaning. But because of the rush he was under, I just skipped some of the general cleanup kind of stuff and just tried to get the knives in quick. So.
It reminds me, I was at a client one time and they asked, I got their switches working and their wireless stood up and all the computer stuff I normally do. And on the way out, they're like, oh, yeah, would you mind just, looking at this one computer quick? I'm like, well, what's wrong with it? We're pretty sure it has a virus. And I'm like, this is not just a quick anything. I don't know what it is, what it did, how it did it. Oh, boy. So how about I take that with me?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so in the video, I spend, let me see, I'm looking at the table of contents. It looks like I spend the first 5 chapters going over honing knives that you've gotten back from a sharpening service, like before you install them, the correct way to adjust the outfeed bed of your jointer relative to the knives. I show you how to take out the joiner knives, clean the cutter head, install the new knives, and then test the jointer at the end before you start using it again. So I go through all that.
Well, actually, one question before that, though.
Sure.
When do you decide to send them in?
Oh, well...
I know when I decide to send mine in, but for somebody who maybe never changed theirs before or they just got one... when should they look at, I really should maybe sharpen these up?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, almost everyone chips the knives way before they're incredibly dull. Right? So in other words, you've got little bits of metal breaking off the cutting edge, usually on all 3 knives at the same time, right? And that means your wood is coming out of the joiner or planer with lines on it.
Yep.
There's metal missing, right?
Yep.
So if you've got a small chip on the, let's say you have a small chip in the middle of the knife, you could actually move one knife slightly left and move another knife slightly right and leave the third knife alone, and you'll remove the chip completely because the chips are on all 3 knives and they're no longer in the same place now that you've moved it. So that's a way to kind of not have to change your knives just based on a single chip. But after using it a lot, especially with knotty lumber or dirty lumber, or incredibly abrasive lumber like teak or jatoba, stuff that's very hard, eventually you just... Oh, yeah. Well, I always say whoever invented those prettiest types of wood made sure they were hard to work with so he wouldn't waste it, right?
Yep.
But yeah, eventually you'll have so many chips everywhere that there's just no way to work around them anymore, right? So let's say I have one chip on a piece of wood, and it happens to be on the right side of the knives. I will often take a hand plane, like a standard angle block plane, and I'll plane off that one little line, that one little raised line of wood, before I go to my planer, because you have to turn the part over to go through the planer and put the jointed side down, and that little line has already caused the wood to sit on a slight angle now. Right? If there's 2 little lines approximately the same height, one on the left, one on the right, then I'll just let it go as is because it sort of supports itself. But when there's only one, sometimes it's a big enough chip that I literally need to take a hand plane and shave off that raised line of wood before I can continue, right? So anyways, that's that means you're pretty much near having to change them if you have tons of lines on the wood everywhere. And sometimes the lines are so fine that you can't even see them unless you hold the wood at the right angle, but your fingertips can feel it immediately. So if you just run your hand across it and you feel something funny, usually if you follow from one end of the board to the other, you'll feel that line goes the whole way. So that means it's a chip on the blades that continued all the way across as it was cutting. So, anyways, in my view, most people don't dull the knives. like most people chip the knives badly enough they need to change them, even though technically they may not be dull in between the chips yet. Now I used to change my joiner knives about every 4 to 6 weeks, and that's an 8-inch jointer. So, the average hobbyist, unless they do it a lot, usually goes at least a year or even 2 years.
Sure.
But one of the great things about this video is that I included my new techniques for honing the knives while they're in the cutter head. And now every 4 to 6 weeks, I sharpen the knives in the machine without even removing them. And I'm able to get about 4 sharpenings that way before I need to change them completely.
Cool.
So
and some of us would get
weeks
longer.
And weeks. Well, yeah, I mean, for a hobbyist, they might get a full year on the first set of knives they put in, and then if they can learn these honing of the knives in the cutter head techniques that I cover in the video, then they might be good for another year, for 4 more years. Like one each sharpening might last them another year.
Yeah.
It totally depends on usage. Like I can't say a hobbyist it'll last a year. For all I know, the hobbyist is retired and puts 30 hours a week into the shop and is whipping like really dirty teaks through their machine all day. You can wear them out in 1 day or 1 week, depending on what you're doing.
Yep.
Right? But most of the hobbyists I talk to, maybe, if they're still working, they might only put in, let's say, between 4 and 6 hours a week in the shop, like on a Saturday or Sunday, or a couple of weeknights, a couple hours here and there. And for most of them, they don't have to change them that often. Which is kind of a bad thing, really, because you only learn how to change knives well by doing it a lot. And if you only do it once every year or 2, it's very hard to remember this stuff,
Which is why somebody put out a DVD on it.
Right. Well, I mean, you've seen my other DVDs. These are kind of long, encyclopedic kinds of things. So.
Well, it's thorough though, and
you basically you basically would. If I were the one buying this, I would definitely have either a DVD player and a television in my shop or a laptop or something, and you would literally watch 10, 15 minutes of it and say, oh yeah, that's how you do it, and then I would do it. I would do what I see, and I would rewind and keep watching, and that's how you learn it, right?
Which is why I'm lucky I have a TV and DVD player in the shop.
Okay, well, good. Hopefully you're not just watching some other shows. You shouldn't be.
Well, once in a while, but not always.
Yeah, it's just Norm Abrams, right?
Yeah. I like putting on some of the movie channels and just let a movie play in the background when I do some of the more tedious hand stuff.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so you'll see in the video that I have, I call it bonus footage, and it's about honing jointer and planer knives in the cutter head. And I think I mentioned to you once before that it must be at least 2 years ago now that I published 2 articles in Fine Woodworking on these new techniques I came up with for honing in the cutter head. So, in the video I cover it in great detail and also cover, how you would, like I show you the jigs and show you how you would go about building these jigs in your shop if you want to make them.
Yeah, I remember seeing the articles and seeing the footage is like, oh, that brings it all together.
Yeah, because, it's one thing to see the jig and everything, but to see it in use and explain, you got to take off the cutter head guard and you got to lower the outfeed bed to this level, and this is why, like this is how you decide the level it should be at. There's quite a bit of detail to make sure you put the stone on the cutter head correctly.
Cool.
So I have, I have a simple jig I designed to hold the cutter head in position so that it can be held in the same position for all 3 knives. And that's a jig that works with any 8-inch joiner, 12-inch, 16-inch, 6-inch, whatever, that has a rabbiting ledge. And then I also explain what to do if you don't have a rabbiting ledge, because I've been to some other shops that had European equipment, like a joiner planer combination machine.
Oh, sure.
And they don't have a rabbiting ledge, but but I explain how you can index the pulley on the cutter head and divide it up into segments, like right on the pulley, so that you know where to locate it at every knife turn, to make sure you're in the same position for all three. So, so it's kind of nice because, I was at somebody's shop a couple of years ago in Calgary, and he had a, 16-inch joiner planer combo, and he has what you call the Tersa knife system. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a disposable knife system for a jointer planer combo, where you slide a knife in from the front of the cutter head, like along the end of it. It has a funny shape so that it fits into the same shape, sort of ground right into the cutter head. So there's no such thing as having to adjust the knives up or down. It just slides right in.
Oh, wow.
It's automatically in the right place. So that's also a disposable knife system, right? But I asked him, well, how expensive are these knives? And he said a lot. Like it costs, I don't know, something like $80 to $100 for a set of knives for this joiner planer combo. And there was no reason he couldn't use the same honing in the cutter head techniques that I use. Just because it's disposable doesn't mean we can't do it. And so in his case, the reason for doing it isn't that it takes so long to change them. It's just that it's a major cost saver as well. So I showed him how to do it, and the nice thing is that sharpening the knives in the cutter head is harder with a planer than it is with a joiner. But in his case, it's a joiner planer combination machine. So I'm basically sharpening them from the top as if it's a jointer.
Oh, cool.
And that covers, the joiner and planer operation in one. So
sure.
Anyway, so after I taught him how to do it, he was like, wow, I'm spending probably $100 a month on disposable knives, and if I could do that in literally 30 minutes or so once a month, he's going to save a ton of money.
Yeah.
So for me, like I said, it's about 2 hours for me to change my knives from scratch, but I can sharpen the three knives in the cutter head in under half an hour. So, I'm saving an hour and a half of my time, and then I'm saving the sharpening cost on top of it. So, there's a limit to how many times you can do it because you're putting a secondary bevel on the knives.
Sure.
And the bigger that secondary bevel becomes, the more likely the heel of the secondary bevel will eventually start hitting the wood instead of the tip. So it's not like you can do it forever, but if I can get 3 or 4 honings before having to change them again, that's buying me a lot of extra time with that machine instead of fooling around changing knives all the time.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so anyway, so that was kind of interesting, and then to do the honing of the planer knives in the cutter head, I devised a strange little jig that rides right on the cutter head and has a little diamond stone that you can buy from Lee Valley or Woodcraft. There are lots of stores that sell it. It's a DMT, little mini sharpening stone.
Oh, sure.
And I sort of showed how you could make several different, like the jig comes apart, but the middle part that has the stone on it, you can make 3 of them at one time when you make the jig. So you have one with a coarse stone on it, and one with a medium, and one with a fine kind of thing. And then you can, use the coarse if the knives are chipped, or if they aren't really that chipped but just are getting dull, then you can just go with maybe a medium or fine right off the bat.
Oh, cool.
So, anyways, it's a real time saver when you can just go into the machine and sharpen the knives without removing the knives at all, and not have to send them out and then go pick them up and everything else.
Yeah, so touch them up and buy yourself some more time.
Yeah. So, anyways, those techniques, really done a lot for me in my shop. I mean, for years I was staring at these knives thinking there's got to be a better way here. I mean, I set up for this 2-hour changeover every 4 to 6 weeks, just driving me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And the good news is I know how to do it well because I've done it so many times. But then I just thought, gee, there's got to be some way to sharpen them. See, I have seen jigs on the market that are just basically like a little honing tool, and you just put it on the knife and slide back and forth to sharpen it. But the problem is it doesn't reference the height of the knife in any way.
Oh.
So if you rub it on one knife longer than another, your knives are now at different heights. right? Whereas
Yep.
my technique on the joiner involves setting the outfeed bed at a precise height, and I put a piece of, I have this self-adhesive laminate sheet that I buy from Lee Valley, and I stick that onto the outfeed bed, and my stone is laying on that, so you're not damaging your joiner bed. You're on this plastic cleared laminate.
Sure.
And the point is that if I grind one knife, you know, let's say the knife is just a hair higher than the outfeed bed, after grinding for a while, the knife starts to get a bit shorter, and eventually you're not actually cutting any more metal off. So I do that, and then rotate the knife, use the jig that I came up with to lock the knife in the exact same rotation, and then you grind the next knife until it no longer will cut any more off. So you're guaranteed to get them at the same height when you're done.
Yeah, they'll all be the same. Cool.
Yeah, and the neat thing is, I mentioned earlier that when you have a sharpening service grind your knives, they don't always do such a great job at making the knife dead straight, like dead straight across. So now I often take the knives that they've sharpen them a little bit better on my Waterstones, then put them in the machine, and then I sometimes even go through my honing technique after putting them in, only because it guarantees any curvature in the knife is removed.
Yeah, that they're all in the same plane of...
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Because like what happens is if your joiner knife is a bit too high in a certain spot, you'll get a snipe on the back end of your bore. If the knife is too low, the joiner won't work at all.
Yeah,
like you get what's called a tapered cut.
Bonk, and then you're done.
Yeah, it cuts like the first 2/3, and then it misses the back third.
Yep.
So if the sharpening service didn't grind it straight, I have to at least set the lowest point of the knife correctly, and any areas that are higher cause snipe. So what I used to say was, well, if you know the back of your knives is high, use the back of your knives to joint all your edges for the first week, trying to wear the knife down. And basically you're just living with the snipe for a couple of weeks until you finally wear that metal down. Whereas now you could use this honing in the cutter head method to just bring it down immediately with your stones, and then off you go, and everything's nice and accurate.
Cool.
Yeah, so anyways, that's what I spend 6 hours and 13 minutes describing.
Well,
it's a 3 DVD set.
Yeah, it's 3 DVDs. I mean, and many of your DVDs are bigger than 3. I mean, so even though you said it's boring, it's not quite as long as some of the other stuff. So
yeah,
we also got to remind people that there's another thing that might help with this one. Is quite a while ago you put out a DVD called Joiner and Planer Secrets.
Right.
So once they get it all set up right, then they can learn how to use it too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like in my, I keep explaining to people this because I get some people buying the Joiner and Planer Secrets video, and then they email me and say, you didn't cover how to tune up the joiner, right? And it's true, but that was my very first DVD back in 2007. I had no idea if it would be profitable, if it would, if it would sell at all. So I wasn't about to put out a 10-hour production on the first one, right? So that was my shortest one, 4.5 hours, a little over 4.5 hours. It covers how to joint, how to use a joiner, how to use a planer, and how to edge glue. Then my second DVD was on the table saw, and now knowing that it appeared it was going to sell well, I went all out and did about 10-hour production on the table saw that included tune-up, setup, and use, right? So it took me this many years to finally say, you know what, I got enough people still complaining that they've now learned how to use the machine, but they have no clue how to change their knives or sharpen them or do any maintenance on the stuff. So
you had to make a sequel.
Yeah, it's time to revisit it, but you can imagine if this was my very first DVD, it never would have been successful because the topic is too darn boring.
People would be like, "What is wrong with this guy?"
Yeah, exactly. Like who does a 6-hour video on changing knives, right? So once you've won over some customers and they know the quality of your work, then now they will buy it. But
there you go.
But you got to develop that following to start. Okay.
Okay. Uh-oh. Well, I hope we didn't lose the recording in any way, but I think we're okay. And we just had a little blip in the recording part, but we wanted to mention that if you want a copy of Honing and Setting Joiner and Planer Knives, just make a comment on this post, and you'll be entered. And then the next time that Hendrik and I get a chance to talk, we'll be choosing a winner.
Yeah, I'll send out another free copy of this one to whoever needs it most.
Yeah, sounds great.
I remember years ago I went to someone else's shop, also not far from mine, and he had attended a seminar here, and then he said, can you come out to my shop because my joiner and planer just don't seem to be working right.
Mm-hmm.
So I got over there, and he had an 8-inch joiner like mine, and I noticed it was set to cut a pretty heavy cut, like maybe a 1/16 of an inch or a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, is this the kind of height that you typically have it set at? And he said, oh yeah, I cut that amount all the time. And I said, well, what do you do for your final pass? Like, how much do you cut off? He said, the same, And I said, oh, because in my shop, my heavy cut is about 3/64, about halfway between the 32nd and the 16th.
Mm-hmm.
And my light cut is literally about 5 or 6 thou. It's very, very fine.
Oh, wow.
So I said, well, we should adjust the bed, the infeed bed, so that you can have a lighter cut. And he looked at me and he said, it moves up and down? He'd been using it for something like 5-10 years and didn't know the infeed bed moved up and down at all. So he just had it set for one heavy cut all the time. Anyway, so I loosened the handle to move it, and the thing was seized right in, just rusted in.
Yeah, I don't want to go anywhere.
So we were shooting WD-40 in all over the place underneath the Gibbs screws and that underneath. There was like a wedge bed design.
Yep. And
we were working on it back and forth with the wheel, trying to get the thing moving, and we finally did. But it was just amazing to me that he had this machine so long and didn't even know it moved up and down. And there are people out there, surprisingly, I don't know if you've seen it, but there are jointers out there with a non-adjustable outfeed bed.
Oh, really?
It's a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
As soon as someone tells me they have a machine like that, I just say, sell it, quick.
Yeah.
Because, I find it's often not necessarily an old planer, but a lot of really inexpensive tabletop jointers. Mm-hmm. Like really mini ones, like 4-inch jointers and stuff.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Some of them don't have an adjustable outfeed. I've even met people that had a full-size 6-inch joiner with a non-adjustable outfeed. Mm. And the problem is, even if I could set the knives perfectly on the first shot, the knives do get shorter with wear. Yeah. So there would come a time where you have to, in my case, lower the outfeed bed just slightly, and I'm back in business again within 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. Whereas the person with a machine like that has to loosen all the knives and try to raise them all.
Yeah, and then raise them equally.
Yeah, which is another hour's job with either a dial indicator or I have other methods, but anybody who has a machine with that non-adjustable outfeed bed, I just say that's just awful. Get yourself a better jointer.
Yeah, well, actually, if I think about it, the very first joiner, I wanted a joiner, and I was getting back into woodworking, and I was using a hand plane and other stuff, and I just really wanted a jointer for smaller projects I was doing. And my wife found one used for somebody was getting rid of it, and it was, I think she paid $35-40 for it. But that was one where it was a little tabletop, louder than my current one actually, but it was a little tabletop one, and that was a fixed outfeed if I remember right.
Was it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everyone kind of understands that the infeed has to go up and down to get different cut depth.
Sure.
But it doesn't really make sense sometimes to people that the outfeed should move. But, as you use your joiner, the knives get shorter. So there will come a time where your knives are suddenly shorter than the outfeed bed, and now every cut you're missing the back end of your wood, you're getting a tapered cut. Yeah. So the solution is either raising the knives or lowering the bed. I can lower the bed on my machine within minutes and have it working perfectly again right away. And the other way, you're loosening all those screws all the knife locking bolts, and then you got to get the knives all at the same height, and that's where all the time comes in.
Yeah.
It's just a nightmare. So you don't want a joiner like that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that much before, and I'm not getting one like that.
Yeah. Well, I've even, like this is kind of sounds silly, but if I set the knives at the perfect height to cut something like cherry, for example, which is kind of a medium density, and I'm getting a perfect cut, no snipe, no tapered cut, just perfect, and then I suddenly switch to something super hard, like Wenge or Jatoba or something, with the harder wood, you'll actually get a snipe at the same knife level. And if I switch to pine or something even softer, I can have a tapered cut. And what it is that after the knife hits the wood uncompresses a certain amount right behind the knife. And the amount it does that depends on the hardness of the wood. So it's not uncommon for me to have my joiner working perfectly, and then I just suddenly have to work on some purple heart or something. And on the very first cut, I see a snipe, and I didn't have it on the cherry. So that means my knives are technically too high now, for that species, and I just raise the outfeed bed like 2 or 3 thou, and I'm ready to go again. Perfect.
Oh, sure.
And then if I switch from there to pine, suddenly I have a tapered cut. It's only cutting the front half of the board and then not cutting the back end. And that's because the pine is uncompressing more right after cutting, which has the effect as if the knife were too low, even though it isn't.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, in other words, it's as if it cut not enough off, but it's caused by the wood uncompressing after being cut, as opposed to the knife actually being too low. So suddenly I have to lower the bed slightly just to get that pine working perfectly. So, it's a really fine difference, but if you're getting a tapered cut, your joiner's not working at that moment. It's not giving you flat stock, and you do have to know how to deal with it. Right? So it's very fine stuff, but, it's like anything, like in woodworking. If you're working with hand planes and stuff, if someone's never used a hand plane before, or barely, they don't appreciate the little nuances. But someone who's been using a plane for a long time, knows when it's off by 2 thou, or the blade is skewed a little, or whatever. Like, you need to have that experience level before you even notice some of this stuff.
Sure.
So the amateur would be still struggling and wondering why they can't get flat lumber, but they'd have no clue why, and they wouldn't know how to adjust something to make it better, right? So, anyways, that's kind of the way woodworking is in general.
It's a collection of different lessons.
Yeah.
Well, what else have you been up to outside of the joiner and planer? We talked about a couple of the joiner and planer DVDs.
Yeah. Well, my cooking instruction stuff has been ramping up a bit too.
Yeah.
Which has been great. It's been a lot of fun. I had one of the local supermarket chains hire me to do 6 Hungarian cooking classes this fall, which started in September and just finished about 3 weeks ago was my last one. And they've getting really good feedback, and they've decided to hire me to do a dozen of them between January and June now.
Oh, nice job.
So yeah, I don't know the details yet on the subject matter, but I gave them 2 proposals on Hungarian classes and 2 on Mexican, and since they've hired me to do 2 classes at 6 different stores, I'm assuming they've chosen 1 Mexican and 1 Hungarian.
Cool.
So, anyway, so that's been a lot of fun.
It's good to hear that's keeping going.
Yeah, and doing stuff for the other big national chain as well, doing classes. It's just maybe 1 class every couple of weeks, like a 1-hour class in several different cities within about an hour drive out here. And hopefully that ramps up into some more lengthier evening classes for them, because they do kind of a lunchtime shorter class for people who are new to them, and then you kind of graduate to doing the more serious and lengthy evening classes.
Cool.
kind of on trial there.
Yeah, and if anybody hasn't looked, if you go to passionforwood.com, the home site, there's actually two sides to it. You can go into the woodworking side or the passion for food on the the food side.
Yeah, and there's pictures there, so don't look at it on an empty stomach.
No, I've went through a few times, and you've made me have snacks.
Yeah, it's been so fun because people come to these seminars or classes and tell me I'm Hungarian, but I was born in Canada, and my grandmother did most of the Hungarian cooking, and she's passed away, and we don't have the recipes. Nobody recorded it. Mm-hmm. And they're just so looking forward to this class because they have these memories of this food, but have not been able to recreate it. And it's such a big thing in people's lives, like in terms of their memories as a child.
Oh yeah, the smells and the tastes and all the different stuff that goes with it brings back so many different memories.
Yeah, people are telling me stories about their childhood and where they grew up, and about their parents coming over from Hungary and stuff like that. That I lived through with my own father. So, anyways, it's nice to get that kind of feedback, and then. And the other thing I love about it is that when I'm woodworking, like, to me, that is a very technical skill, at least the way I practice it. Mm-hmm. I'm not like the kind of guy that just grabs a block of wood and starts carving something. To me, everything's in thousandths of an inch, and it's all about measurement and precision. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I'm cooking, I can actually throw in a bit of this and a bit of that, and I can eyeball and I can taste, and like I do have kind of a natural talent that doesn't require measuring everything, which is kind of a big break for me from the technical side of woodworking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it makes you feel like it's a little more artistic, I mean, there are woodworkers who are like that, like artistic and everything's free flowing, but I'm not like that. I'm totally anal the other way in woodworking. So for me, it's almost a relaxation thing, to there will be people, like I'll ask them, I'll say, how many people here have to measure everything when they're cooking, and quite a few say, yeah. I mean, I follow the recipe to the letter because I don't know how to make it up as I go along.
Improvise.
Yeah, and for me, in the cooking side, anyway, I do have the ability to improvise because I guess because of the way I learned to cook from my mother as a child, Mm-hmm. I mean, baking's different. Baking, you do have to be very technical to make sure it works.
Otherwise, things end up flat.
Yeah, but when you're cooking, cooking in a pan and stuff like that, you can really just kind of wing it and throw different ingredients in that you just happen to find in your fridge, and you can do amazing things. So, Anyway, so that's been great, and yeah, and I'm working on a little nightstand for someone right now. I'm trying to get it out in time for Christmas. So.
Oh, well, hopefully they don't listen.
Yeah. Well, the client's actually been extremely slow at getting me the handles for the drawers that she's been shopping for herself. So I kind of recently told her it could end up being, first week of January type thing, which didn't bother her because she was supposed to get me the pulls something like 6 weeks ago, and I still don't have them.
That happens.
So, yeah. Anyway, so that's been a bit of a challenging job. It's not a big job, but the client has an existing piece of furniture that has to be duplicated exactly, and it has some challenging moldings and stuff, so that's involved a bit of freehand carving and stuff I don't normally do, but had to just to do this job. So
it's fun to do something different once in a while.
Yeah, and then I got my Saturday morning seminars cranking those out from September till just before Christmas, so I got another 3 or 4 before Christmas, and then I generally take time off between Christmas and New Year's, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a little bit of time off between Christmas and New Year's when I normally don't, but I'm hoping to, instead of normally we have a show in the local woodworking club that I'm part of. We have a yearly show around the March time frame. So my wife knows beginning of February until the show, she doesn't see me much because I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't do anything for this, and I need to sell some stuff, and I need to demo something, and I need to. So I just spend the whole month of February in the shop.
Okay.
So I'm trying to not have to do that this time.
Okay.
Knowing me, I'll get sidetracked on something else during that week, and I'll still end up February in the shop. So.
Yeah. It's hard to get everything done on time. You got to really plan ahead.
Yeah, shop time is always okay though.
Yeah. I mean, it's as a hobbyist, it's supposed to be fun, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Like for me, I put a lot of hours in every week, and I'm not saying I don't have fun. I do really like it, but you can have deadlines that make it feel more like work at times, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's a few
that's
times.
the way life is, but sometimes I look at some of my students who do it just as a hobby, and I think, wow, like, it'd be nice to be able to do it just as a hobby for a change, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a different mindset, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, even I'll have students come to a seminar, and I just did one on Saturday on making drawers, and I build one drawer in the seminar, like from scratch, and they're like, wow, there's a lot of steps, and they're kind of intimidated and scared to go home and do it, and I say, they're worried about how many hours it's going to take, and I'm like, you're a hobbyist, right? And yeah. You're not supposed to be counting the hours. You're supposed to be having fun. Like, who cares how long it takes? Have fun and have a cold beer when you're done, and see you again next Saturday. Come back and do some more, right?
And there you go.
So, I mean, you don't have to think of the hours when you're doing it for fun, but for me, I do, because I have to see if I'm making a living or not.
Yeah.
So, it's a bit of a pain doing it for a living sometimes when you have to think about the time and how many hours it takes and how much you're earning per hour, right? Anyways. So, looking forward to Christmas and some time off, and do lots more cooking and baking with my kids and stuff. So
yeah, it sounds great.
It'll be a bit of pleasure there too. So.
Well, if I don't have a chance to talk to you between now and then, I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll work on scheduling the next one and let people know how long they have to have the comment to try to win the honing and setting joiner knives DVD.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I'll check my order forms for that winner of the Mortise and Tenon one to come forward, and hopefully crank that out in the mail as soon as I hear from them.
That sounds great.
Okay, nice talking to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Hendrik.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.